Okay, let's jump right into it. We often think of history as just a bunch of isolated, boring dates in a textbook. But really, it's this massive, unstoppable chain reaction. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to trace the tumbling dominoes from 1453 to 1799. We're talking about a series of events that completely shattered the old medieval system and literally built the reality you and I live in today. Because when one massive paradigm falls, well, it knocks over everything in its path.
So we have to ask ourselves, how do you actually get from medieval, isolated farming villages to modern, globe-spanning superpowers in just 300 years? Historically speaking, that is a blink of an eye. It all starts when a 1,000-year-old link to ancient Rome suddenly breaks. For centuries, life in Europe was intensely local. People cared about their day-to-day survival, and the future was basically just waiting for the afterlife. But then, in 1453, Constantinople falls to the Ottomans. And this event pushes a flood of scholars seeking refuge into the West, and they brought with them ancient Greek and Roman wisdom that had been completely locked away for centuries. Suddenly, the lights turn on, and minds begin to open.
And that shift brilliantly captures our first falling domino. Imagine going from a world where everyone is just looking up, nervously waiting for the afterlife, to suddenly looking around at the world itself. That's the Renaissance. We're moving from this hyper-local, theology-obsessed medieval worldview into a brand new era driven by humanism, a really deep focus on the human experience and the physical, tangible world right in front of us. And we see this bursting to life with incredible scientific breakthroughs. I mean, you have Leonardo da Vinci obsessively studying human anatomy, designing mind-bending military engineering. And you have Copernicus publishing these world-shattering calculations, proving that the Earth actually orbits the sun, which completely upended the accepted traditional authority of the time. Now, what's really fascinating is that this new, calculating mindset didn't just stay in the realm of science. It spilled straight into power and politics. Enter an Italian diplomat named Niccolò Machiavelli. Right in the middle of the chaotic Italian wars, he writes this manual on ideal rule called The Prince. He perfectly captured this entirely new era by boldly advising rulers to just forget traditional Christian morality. Instead, he argued they simply needed to play the game of survival, like a snake waiting to strike or a chess player moving pieces on a board. Might makes right. It was this massive, shocking departure from the chivalric codes of the past, and it birthed a ruthlessly pragmatic approach to statecraft that, you guessed it, we still call Machiavellian today. But while Machiavelli was busy redefining politics, the one institution holding all of Europe together, the Catholic Church, faced its own massive, massive crisis. Think about this. Imagine your local church rolling out a VIP fast pass to heaven. And the catch? You could literally buy it with cash just so they could fund lavish building projects back in Rome. These were called indulgences. And as you might expect, this struck a serious nerve for a lot of people, making the church appear dangerously obsessed with wealth and worldly power rather than, actual faith. Well, all that frustration finally snapped in 1517. An extremely angered monk named Martin Luther nails his 95 complaints to a church door in Wittenberg. Now, normally in history, that's just a quiet execution, end of story. But thanks to the brand new technology of the printing press, Luther's highly localized protest became a viral bestseller almost overnight. It was like the 16th century internet. Everyone was reading his ideas. Within just a few years, after literally burning a papal order and refusing to back down, he was branded an outlaw. But it was way too late. His rebellion rapidly cascaded into the Protestant Reformation, fracturing Europe's religious framework forever. The genie was out of the bottle. And as Europe fractured internally over religion, its explorers began looking outward, seeking new, faster shortcuts to the riches of Asia. Christopher Columbus famously bumped into the Americas. And this inadvertently kicked off what we call the Columbian Exchange. Guys, this wasn't just a discovery. It was a massive, completely unprecedented global exchange of crops, animals, belief systems, and tragically, diseases, moving back and forth across the Atlantic. Just to put this into perspective for how much it changed our everyday lives, without this exchange, Italy wouldn't have tomatoes and Ireland wouldn't have potatoes. The world was suddenly huge, yet at the exact same time getting much, much smaller. Now, to fund these insanely expensive global voyages, the Dutch basically invented something we use every single day, the stock market. They established the very first public joint stock corporation, the Dutch East India Company. Everyday citizens could buy shares, which, by the way, led to the first economic bubbles, like the infamous tulip craze. But these early megacorporations didn't just sell shares. They became so insanely powerful that they effectively operated as their own ruthless private empires. Seriously, imagine a modern tech corporation having its own independent navy, a professional army, and conquered territories around the globe. That is exactly what was happening. We really have to pause here, because behind all of this shiny new wealth was a staggering, horrific human cost. Millions of human beings were caught in the crosshairs of this new global economy. Millions of Africans were purchased or captured, forced into the transatlantic slave trade to provide brutal labor for the New World. And meanwhile, millions of Europeans were also being captured by North African pirates and forced into Mediterranean slave markets. Make no mistake about it, human trafficking was the dark, terrible engine keeping these newly minted global empires afloat and wealthy. So back in Europe, if you take the deep religious anger of the Reformation and you add the massive new wealth pouring in from global trade, you get a catastrophic explosion. Rulers suddenly had the cash to fund permanent, professional standing armies equipped with gunpowder and muskets. And the result? The 30 Years' War in Central Europe. It was this absolutely brutal conflict that escalated entirely out of control, ultimately wiping out up to a third of the Holy Roman Empire's population through fighting, disease, and starvation. But from the unbelievable ashes of that devastating war came a settlement called the Peace of Westphalia. And this completely reshaped global politics by giving birth to this foundational concept of state sovereignty. It's the very reason why today one country can't just legally stroll in and tell another country what laws to pass. You control your own borders, period. The Pope or an emperor could no longer just dictate how a local prince or leader ran their own territory. This laid the absolute groundwork for modern international law. Now, with this new concept of absolute sovereign power, rulers took wildly different approaches to using it. Take France, where Louis XIV claimed his power came directly from God. He strictly protected medieval tradition, literally forcing his nobles to live under his watchful eye at the lavish palace of Versailles so they couldn't scheme against him. But then, contrast that directly with Peter the Great of Russia, who did the exact opposite. He embraced the scientific revolution. He literally played undercover boss in Western European shipyards just so he could learn their secrets and aggressively modernize and westernize the Russian navy and military. But here's the thing. Absolute power breeds absolute resentment. Intellectuals started gathering in coffee houses, which were basically the chaotic internet forums of the 18th century, and they were armed with these incredibly radical Enlightenment ideas. They began questioning the very fabric of society. Why shouldn't an individual have freedom? Why can't we speak our minds, vote, or choose our own religion? And the most dangerous idea of all was that the law should be the supreme authority of the land, completely superseding the mood of any absolute monarch. 1.3 billion. Let that mind-boggling number sink in for a second. That is the amount of leaves the French king Louis XVI essentially threw across the Atlantic. Still bitter over previous military losses, Louis decided to heavily fund the American Revolution simply to spite the British. He spent double France's annual revenue, money they definitely did not have. He literally bankrupted his own country just to stick it to his rivals. And the immense irony here? He was funding rebels who absolutely hated the very concept of a monarchy. So what exactly happens when a starving population, who can't even afford a loaf of bread, starts reading radical philosophy about freedom and equality? Well, you get a powder keg. Years of severe crop failures led to mass starvation, all while the royals sat comfortably in their palaces. The people had minds full of Enlightenment ideals, but completely empty bellies. It's a terrifying combination for any ruler. Because seriously, the French political system at the time was undeniably absurd. To try and solve this massive financial crisis, the king called an assembly of the three estates. The first estate, the clergy, and the second estate, the nobility, represented just a tiny fraction of the population. The third estate represented 98% of the common people. Yet, the catch? Each estate only got one vote. This meant that the 98% of commoners who were actually doing all the work and paying the taxes could be legally outvoted 2-1 by the elite 2% who paid almost nothing. Make it make sense. So things unraveled with terrifying speed. The frustrated Third Estate locked themselves in an indoor tennis court of all places and swore to form a new constitution in May 1789. By July, starving Parisians stormed the Bastille prison for weapons, and what started as a somewhat reasonable demand for a constitutional monarchy rapidly exploded into a total war against tradition. In just a few short years, it goes from politicians demanding a constitution to crowds storming prisons, straight to the king losing his head at the guillotine in 1793. And this ushered in the Bloody Reign of Terror, where radical Jacobins banned Christianity, invented a whole new calendar, and sent anyone even suspected of opposing the revolution straight to the chopping block. Okay, I absolutely love this piece of trivia because it completely impacts our lives today. Our modern political labels were born right in this chaotic, high-stakes room in France. When they were debating the ultimate fate of the king, the politicians physically split into two groups. The radicals, who wanted to completely tear down the old system and eliminate the monarchy, physically went and sat on the left side of the room. The moderates, who wanted to keep the king as a symbol of tradition and order, sat on the right. Left-wing and right-wing politics literally started as a seating arrangement, and that simple, spontaneous split permanently shaped the exact way we label and debate governance right now. So, as we wrap up this explainer, think about this. In just 300 years, those falling dominoes completely erased the medieval world. From the rediscovery of ancient texts, to the bloody birth of absolute states, to fierce, world-changing revolutions. Europe was entirely transformed. But the chain reaction didn't stop there. With a young, ambitious general named Napoleon Bonaparte busy carving up a massive new French empire, and loud, smoke-belching factories rapidly replacing farms across Britain, the board was set for a terrifying new game. How would a hyper-connected, fully industrialized world handle the awesome power of these modern superpowers? That is a question that would define the next century.